Kia ora koutou. I want to talk about something very concerning, which I think everybody needs to be concerned about. Although at the moment we're all kind of heavily distracted by other things, namely viruses. The reason I kind of said that word in a whisper then is because there is a lot of censorship going on in social media, as you probably know. Okay, and I've become increasingly aware of this over probably the last year, I guess. Obviously being a YouTuber myself, it's kind of something that I'm probably more aware of, or more, is more in my orbit. And I've noticed with a lot of channels that I follow, they're becoming more and more euphemistic and oblique about what they say. And I've also come across people with other channels demonetized or censored in one way or another. Okay, so sometimes this seems to be, from what I'm aware, is the kind of most overt way that this happens is people's channels get shut down, or second to that, they get demonetized if they're already monetized, or third to that, there's what people kind of refer to as shadow banning. My understanding of shadow banning is that it's kind of your output is limited. So if you post videos on social media platform, it won't be shown to as many people as it would have been had they not targeted it, and this might affect the offending video. I'm doing inverted commas with one hand, I don't know why, or this might relate to all your output. And we don't really know because, as far as I'm aware, none of the social media platforms are publicly kind of stating their policies on these things. Now, this did happen a while back with Patreon. A lot of people that I followed left Patreon in disgust and protesting against the fact that somebody had their channel shut down. And this was somebody who was, from the research I've done, from what I believe and understand, quite a nasty piece of work. Somebody on the far right of the political spectrum who said some very kind of misogynistic, and I think it actually kind of threatened a woman with violence on a social media platform, something along those lines. Now, I didn't object to that, and I'll kind of come back to why I didn't object to that, and I've got a very clear kind of rationale to as to what I think is acceptable and not acceptable. But what I think is happening is Orwellianism, and I think it's really kind of very Orwellian, in fact. Because if you think about 1984, so for those of you who've not read George Orwell's 1984, people's thoughts are being monitored, and people's conversations are being monitored through cameras in their television sets. So that's what happens now when we go on social media. It's not the TV, but it's as good as, isn't it? And some of us, for me, I use my iPhone for everything. I seldom use a PC, but my iPhone is my television. It's my everything, really. It's my source of communication. Is where I shoot my videos, which is where they're shaky. So we are being listened to via our televisions. As good as, effectively. Okay, and I'm not being tinfoil hat. We know this because what I'm saying now is screened on some level. Perhaps sometimes by a human being, but more often by some kind of IT algorithm. And if I say certain things, and this is what we're finding more and more, then I may have some of these consequences of either, and I've had people's channels that I follow that have been shut down, they've been demonetized, and then there's the concept of shadow banning, which is where your output is just kind of limited, so your videos aren't shown to as many people. Now, why is this happening? Is this because they're terrorists and telling people how to make bombs, or they're spreading hatred against particular groups of society? No, it's because they're talking about certain things. Okay, how can I say this without saying it? So one of the areas that has been targeted is CON, I'm not really good at spelling out loud, I have to write down to spell, CONSPIRACY stuff. Okay, most of which is quite innocent. You know, and I quite enjoy that stuff. I'm quite skeptical, but you know, I also find it intriguing. But all that kind of stuff is being discriminated against, certainly on Facebook, and things like TikTok. If you talk about CORONA or anything related to that, then you can be shadow banned, and all kinds of different things happen there as well. Now, why is this happening? Okay, so. My understanding is, from what I've read and watched, that a lot of this is to do not with this, let's call it the C word, the word that I spelled out a little. Well, there are two C words, aren't there? So that's going to get tricky. See, it's how difficult this gets, okay? So let's talk about, so I will say the C word, and we'll say the Pauliness. Okay, so the reason I believe, I mean, please tell me if you know, if you can correct me or provide some more information on this. I'm talking from the best of my awareness, but you know, it's very difficult to get good information on this kind of thing. So my understanding is that if you talk about the C word online, they don't like that. They meaning the social media platforms, because one of the things that is connected and associated with the C word is people that raise concerns about, I'm going to do a little gesture here, so where you would go to a nurse and roll up your sleeve, and they might do kind of something like this with a syringe. Okay, so what's a good euphemism for this one? It makes talking about things so difficult, doesn't it? What should we call that? Jabs. Okay. I'm bound to mess this up at some point and say the wrong word. In fact, this is my third take, because I've done this already in previous attempts to record this video. So what's going on here? I mean, so what their theory is that if people are put off having jabs, that will have a major, potentially dangerous effect on society. Okay, and yes, you know, like I said, I'm not a doctor. I've not kind of studied this in depth, but I'm prepared to believe that if people stop having jabs, then it could have, things like measles coming back, and we had a measles outbreak here, and stuff like that. And of course, the Pauliness is something that they will, the powers that be, will be trying to tackle with a jab. Okay, so they don't want tinfoil hat wearing, C word following, anti-jab protesting people raising these issues on the public platforms, or the social media platforms. Now, isn't that terrifying that a particular point of view is just being shut down? Okay, but Markie, when it was somebody, you lefty snowflake, social justice warrior, whatever words you want to use, when somebody that was on the right side of the far right of the political spectrum was censored, you didn't have a problem with it. Okay, well, I'll tell you why I didn't have a problem with it, and this is very clear. Okay, so anybody that wants to call me a hypocrite, you haven't listened. Okay, because I'm very, very clear about this. I think that so I come from the UK originally, so I'm living in New Zealand now, okay, which is kind of very similar politically, law-wise, they're all pretty much the same, really. I believe that, traditionally, and for a very long time in history, we've had freedom of speech, okay, and more recently, hate speech laws have come in, okay. Now, a lot of people have a problem with hate speech laws, and they say that's an infringement on freedom of speech. Okay, and this is a really difficult one. It's very, very difficult. I know. I think people should have freedom of speech as much as possible. But if somebody is just basically being a bully and is inciting hatred, on a racial level or around different sexual orientations or anything like that, then I think that is a crime. I think that is bad. So I tend to go along with the kind of the laws of the land, really, in terms of, that's, I support that kind of ethic. I think it's a difficult one. I think it's like, where do you draw the line? I don't always agree with where people draw the line, and sometimes I might come down on one side and sometimes I might come down on the other. Okay. Because it's a very tricky one, because freedom of speech, we should give people the optimum freedom of speech, but also not support hate speech. And how do you determine that? How do you draw the line? Very, very difficult. Okay, so sometimes sometimes I might fall on the line of freedom of speech, and sometimes I might fall on the line of anti-hate speech. Okay, so but I think that's the righteous way of doing it. Okay, and democratic governments have debated this, and people have died for this, and people have protested. This is something that's evolved and been fought for over hundreds of years, probably. Okay, so that's that I think is a good model. It's not a perfect model, but I don't think you will ever have a perfect model. Okay, but social media, okay, this is the really scary thing. Okay, for me, is that not only have they drawn the line against freedom of speech, that it's no longer okay to express a particular opinion, which isn't about hate, which isn't bullying or targeting particular groups of people. It's an opinion, it's a view. Okay, and I'm not even going to state my views on jabs. Okay, whether jabs are good or whether jabs are bad. Okay, I'm not even going to get into that. Okay, and it doesn't matter. Okay, because even if they're really good, and people that protest against them are potentially causing a danger by encouraging people not to have them, they still have that right. That is not hate speech. Okay, that should not be squashed. Okay, what should happen is that we have informed debate. Okay, and that information and research is made public, which it is pretty much. We can all, with a little bit of effort online, access research material. Okay, so I think that is how we counter that problem, is with debate and the availability of information, which we already have. Okay, that's already in place. Not through censorship. Now, the other more kind of sinister thing around here is, which is even more sinister than, in a way, than George Orwell's dystopian vision, is that in his vision it was the state that was exercising the control. Okay, albeit that it wasn't an elected state, it was a tyrannical state. But in this reality, current reality, it's not a state that's exercising this control. It's something that goes far, far beyond states, and is not accountable and is not democratic. So the social media, which is all kind of, which is owned by lots of monopolies, okay, that is the way we express ourselves these days, especially on lockdown. We can't talk to anyone. We express ourselves, the streets, the social media is the conversation in the pub. Social media is the conversation on the street corner, and even more worryingly, social media is the conversation in our own front rooms. Okay, and that's being censored by an undemocratic, unelected, unaccountable body, and that is pretty terrifying. Okay, and like I said, this isn't tinfoil hat stuff. This is very real. I think it's thin end of the wedge. I think it's going to get worse. I think it's going to be very difficult to protest, because these people have the power to just shut down voices very easily. Okay, so if you think about, so the 1984 vision, okay, so the idea is that, people are listening to you through microphones in your television set. If they hear something that they don't like, then a van will come round, and you'll get a knock on the door, and you'll get bundled into the van and taken away, which is terrifying. Terrifying, but also not very efficient, because you'd have to have almost as many people listening in that kind of paradigm as you have people being listened to. But today, with technology, we can all be listened to, and the equivalent of the van coming around to shut us down, albeit that being bundled from the van is a whole lot more kind of terrifying and horrific than having your channel shut down or being shadow banned. But they can still shut down our voices, and they can shut down our voices so easily. Okay, and this could be, Mark, I think jabs are a good thing. I think they should be shutting down people that object to jabs. This might affect this might prevent thousands of deaths. Okay, you might have a point there. I'm not even going to argue that case. Okay, you might have a point, but if they can arbitrarily decide what they're going to shut down and what they're not, do you actually trust them to always get that right? You agree with them on this issue, but will you agree with them on the next issue, and the issue after that, and the issue after that? Okay, and they're unaccountable. There's no parliament meeting to discuss this. There's no democracy. This is a very small group of people making decisions that affect a massive group of people, and I think it's pretty terrifying. The other little kind of analogy I would draw, more of a comparison, I suppose, to an analogy, is I think in lots of ways the IT revolution is very like the Industrial Revolution. And the Industrial Revolution, as anyone knows the history, was highly exploitative. But it kind of, it didn't kind of begin with people saying, come and work in my factories and I'll exploit you. It started with, lots of employment opportunities occurring in the towns and the cities, and people from rural areas, sometimes where there was unemployment, sometimes where there was poverty, well, often where there was poverty, were thinking, oh, there's work in the city, I'll move and work in the city. So they work in the cotton mill or whatever it might be. Cotton's kind of, full of exploitation, wasn't it, from the growing to the selling. And then they were kind of effectively enslaved, and expected to work ridiculous hours, often in very unhealthy environments. And a lot of the work involved, I'm moving beyond kind of cotton production now to other things. Often the work involved working with hazardous chemicals. So it's like the phrase "mad as a hatter." I can't remember what it was they used to use in the manufacture of hats. But it's something that was toxic and used to send people a bit doolally. So the phrase "mad as a hatter" came out. So without going too much into into bringing the Industrial Revolution to life for you, it started off as people feeling a need. People were vulnerable. People were invited willingly to come into the factories, and once they were willingly in the factories, and then they became dependent upon the money from the factories, they were then exploited and enslaved. And this feels a little bit like social media, really. It's like it's free, isn't it? We don't pay anything for it. So it's like, oh, come on Facebook, come on YouTube, come on this, come on that. So we come in kind of, feeling all happy and enjoying the goodies that we're getting. And then once we become dependent on it, we're kind of caught, aren't we? We're caught. Are we dependent on social media? I don't know. That's a whole other interesting debate, isn't it? Are we moving in the direction of becoming dependent on it? Maybe. And certainly when things like lockdown, it's a bit like trying to get online. During the day during lockdown, particularly the beginnings of lockdown, you probably noticed that it was very difficult because everybody was online, because people were isolated, they were bored, so they were wanting to, get online and talk to people and do their networking through the social media platforms. So, yeah, I'm not gonna get into the debate of whether we're dependent on it or not. It's an interesting one, and I guess probably the answer would be in some ways no, in some ways yes, and perhaps we're going to become more dependent upon it, particularly if we are going to have to socially isolate more. So this is really worrying. What can we do about it? I don't know. But I think the first step is always knowledge, isn't it? It's information, is being aware of this. And, it is, just think about how I've had to use euphemisms for things and not say things out loud. It's really, that is really terrifying, just to speak in whispers because somebody's going to come and get you. Yes, they're not going to kind of take me away and torture me, but because they don't have to. Pretty scary, okay? And a lot of people will be saying, well, Markie, this isn't scary. There's this big disease that's killing everybody. That's scary. Why are you worrying about this when you should be worrying about the disease? Well, the disease will pass. The poorliness will come and go. It will it will manifest. I think it will disappear. It will kind of resurface, and we will deal with it. We will cope with it. It'll be horrible. It's horrific that people are dying, and not only unnecessarily, but in horrible deaths. So I'm not making light of the appallingness by any means, okay? But the appallingness, we're doing what we can do about that as individual citizens, and there's not much more that we can do, really. So as long as we kind of take the advice that we're given as social distance to do all those kinds of things, what more can what's the point of worrying about that? And I think it's more important to look at some of the things that have been eclipsed. It's always important to look at the things that have been eclipsed. I did a video on the dangers of pornography to children, and how pornography in fact actually changes people's brains on online pornography. And I put it out at the time of Momo. Remember the big Momo scare that went around? And I remember somebody writing a comment on there saying, "Oh, pornography doesn't do any problem. It doesn't cause any problems. It's people voluntarily look at it." I work in the field of helping children that have been damaged by it, so I know that it causes problems. And I say Momo is people are being told to kill their parents, and it's like, where's Momo now? And I think this Pauliness is going to be a little bit like Momo. All these things are a little bit like Momo. It's not that they're not serious. It's not that they don't need attention. They don't need addressing, because they do. But actually, while these things are going on, somebody else is it's like the magicians. How do magicians kind of how does magic work? Because they get you to focus on one thing while they're doing, while they're sneakily doing, they get you to focus on the right hand while the left hand's doing something crafty. And I think there's a degree of this goes on, without wishing to sound too tinfoil hat, because I'm not a particularly tinfoil hat person. So what can we do? Be aware. Okay, that's all I would suggest. And if you can share this video, that would be fantastic. And just that, if you've got a YouTube channel, just or a presence on any other social media, just have a think about how you're going to deal with this. Are you going to use euphemisms like me? Are you going to change your content? How are you going to deal with that? And just look out for what might happen to you. I think we should be fighting this. But I don't know how. But I'd be very interested to hear your thoughts on this. Rangimarie.